Hey there, magical experimenters. Taylor Ellwood here. And today I thought I would answer a question that was asked a little while back. What is it that practitioners overlook in their magical practice? And I've been thinking about that question a little bit because it's an interesting question to ask. I could come up with all kinds of answers, but I think the answer that came to me was one that was pretty profound. It came about as a result of the last few days. You see, a few days ago on Sunday, I lost power and electricity in my house, and so from Sunday until Wednesday morning, basically 2.5 days, I didn't have any electricity. And it was interesting because all my usual routines were disrupted. You know, I couldn't write on my computer because I didn't have any power to turn it on. I couldn't blog, I couldn't make videos, I couldn't do all the other stuff. What I could do is I could read books, and I could shovel the snow and ice out of my driveway, and I could do a bit of qigong, but I didn't really want to move around too much because, quite frankly, when you're really cold and you don't have a lot of heat, you don't really have the heat. The last thing you want to do is um, move because it takes even more energy to stay warm. So you might be thinking, well, what does that have to do with anything related to Magic, Taylor? I did my daily magical work. I did. I shoveled the driveway and I read books. And I just unplugged for a bit. Here's what it has to do with magic and with what people overlook. What people overlook about magic is control, specifically the illusion of control that they think they have over their lives, because all it takes is the right circumstance for you to realize how little control you really have over your life. And thank you, Max Out. I appreciate that you've been using the magic of writing. That's cool. But as I was saying, all it takes is the right situation. In this case, my situation was I don't have any power. I mean, what could I do about it? I was among over 200,000 people who didn't have power in the state of Oregon. So sure, I could whip up a magical working to somehow get the electric company here quicker, but really that wasn't going to happen because the electric company was basing their decision, and rightly so, on the idea of we're going to do what we can to restore power to the maximum number of homes, the largest number. That meant that, in some cases, they were going to work on areas that they weren't going to get to my area. The other thing too was that I had actually had power up through Sunday. There were some people who hadn't had power until from Friday on. So it's interesting because you get into a situation where you kind of have the scales fall off your eyes. We live in some ways, we live in a very sheltered reality sometimes. If you have the basic needs of life taken care of, you can take those things for granted. And I say that as somebody who, I'll tell you, I really appreciated being able to take a shower on Wednesday, a hot shower. I took a cold shower the day before, because I just couldn't stand being stinky any longer. But it was nice to actually take a warm shower, a hot shower. It was nice to be able to do laundry again. It was nice to be able to move around and actually feel like I could do stuff. And this whole experience, what it really did for me is it gave me some time to reflect and think about some things. I made some decisions around some of the activities that I do on a weekly basis that I'm going to scale back some things so I can focus more on my writing and things like that. Not the videos, because I really enjoy making the videos, but some other activities. And I realized that really what it comes right down to is that we have this sense of control with magic. You do a magical working to get a result. You do a magical working for this or that. And you do it because you want to have control over your environment. But sometimes you don't have that control over your environment no matter what you do. And the only thing you really have control over in the end is yourself and how you choose to respond to a situation. In my case, I chose to respond to the situation by bundling up reading books and actually managed to read through a couple of them. I think in like four books that I ended up reading, which was pretty sweet because I normally don't get that much reading done in that short of a time. Um, and I chose to shovel my driveway and a portion of the road to clear out the ice and snow, so it was easier to get in and out of my drive because we live on a hill. That's what I had. That wasn't even what I had control over. What I had control over was my choice and how I chose to respond. And I'll admit there were a couple times there where I felt a little depressed and unhappy because I mean it's cold and I want to be warm. I want to be able to do what I want to do, et cetera, et cetera. But I let it go because I didn't have control over it. I released it. And that was something else that I had control over. I had control over what I allowed to let me frustrate myself, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that a lot of times when people do a practice of magic, what they overlook and what they should pay attention to is how much control or lack thereof there really is. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you shouldn't practice magic to get results in your life. I'm not saying that you shouldn't practice magic for other reasons for that matter, and that it won't give you a sense of control, because sometimes I've been able to do some amazing magical workings that have helped me take care of situations or steer things my way or whatever else. But there are going to be moments in your life where no matter what you do, you're not in control and there's not much you can do to get control other than to wait and let go of whatever it is that you're feeling at the time, and choose your response. And I think that's something that I would offer, and this is based on my own experience too, is that sometimes even when you feel like you have more control, and when you do perhaps have more control over your life in the moment, it's worthwhile to consider that just because you have that control doesn't necessarily mean that rushing into a situation to fix a problem or do something else is the right call. Sometimes what you have to be willing to do is give away that sense of entitlement, that sense of control, that sense of power, and actually truly be present with what is going on, and then choose your responses and your reactions instead of feeling the need to control the situation, instead of feeling the need to take charge. Maybe take the chance to put some thought and perspective and awareness into where you are, and before you leap, make some better choices. And again, I say this as somebody who, in hindsight, I've made some pretty impulsive and rash choices at times where I've rushed into a situation, where I've let my emotions get the better of me, where I've let other stuff. And so even though I've had perhaps the magical wherewithal to take care of a situation, I haven't necessarily approached it from the right way. And even if that situation has worked out favorably for me, perhaps the one thing that would have benefited me even more is if I took a moment to be aware of what was going on and why I was choosing to react to the situation that I was choosing to react to, and instead took a step back and really examined, like, what was it that I needed to be in control of? What was I trying to control, and was I really displaying that control of myself, let alone anything else in my environment? Because you see, with magic, if it really comes right down to it, why do people practice magic? This is a question that's worth asking. There are numerous answers to it, but one of the most common answers that I hear, and it's one that I think applies as much to myself as to anyone else, is that sometimes we practice magic because we want to have a sense of power, a sense of control over our lives. We want to have a sense of empowerment. And there's nothing wrong with wanting that sense of power. I want to be very clear about that. I'm not naysaying it. But if that's what we want, we have to be willing to examine what is really going on there, because true empowerment starts from within. Yes, you might be able to have control of the environment around you in an ideal situation, but sometimes that control isn't enough. Sometimes the reality is that what we find out is that yes, we're in control of the environment, but we're not in control of ourselves. And so we unmask. And I'm not even saying that control is the right way to go, but I think that really what I'm saying is that if we can acknowledge when we're not feeling like we're in control, if we can acknowledge when we're feeling vulnerable, when we're in a situation where maybe we have control of some of the external circumstances around us and we can make things go a certain way, but we actually pause and we say, but here's what's going on inwardly. It can help us to make better decisions about our magical workings and about the choices we make in our lives in general. So often what I see for people, both experienced and non-experienced magicians, is that people get hung up on a need to feel like they're in charge of their lives. And this isn't limited to magicians alone. I mean, I see this with people in general. We've all been there. We've all done it. But what we might recognize and accept is that we really aren't in as much control as we think we are. And that sometimes the hardest choices that we make are the ones where we acknowledge that and we give in to the current, we submit to the situation. Certainly, that was one of the experiences that I had in 2018. You know, I basically was in a situation where where no matter what I did to try and gain control of a situation, nothing I did worked. It was a hard circumstance to face. It made me feel powerless. And I was powerless in a very real sense because everything I was trying to do, I was fighting against the current. And it was only when I let go of that need to fight the current and when I truly submitted to the situation that I then began to find a sense of control, because suddenly I was like, okay, well, here I am. I'm at the bottom. Now what do I do? I was like, all right, I'm just going to rest for a while. I'm going to learn from this. I'm going to be open and humble, and I'm going to discover what I can do better. And that's what I did. And then from there I rode that current to a better situation in my life, but one I wouldn't have considered because I've been fighting that situation, fighting what I really wanted, because I was so fixated on this idea that there was a one true way to go about attaining the success I wanted in my life. And it wasn't until I let that go and actually opened myself to discovering what it really could be that I found a sense of control that actually ended up being much better for me, because it was based on realizing that sometimes you have to let go and ride the current and go where you need to go, and then you'll find your answers. Now, I don't know if most other people are going to tell you that, because when I look at most of the books out there on magic and what most people are saying, I think that normally what I see is it's really more about, well, hey, it's either you're practicing magic because you're on a spiritual journey of sorts, or it's you want results. And certainly I've talked about that stuff before, but this is one of the reasons why I try to present the alternatives as well and the realizations that come with it, because I think when you only hear certain narratives, it really hurts your understanding of the experiences that you can have in life. And I'm going to tell you, set to you straight, you are going to have moments in your life or even when you've attained what you really wanted, you're going to sometimes face the realization of, oh my gosh, I've gotten what I want. Now what? And it can throw you for a tailspin. That sense of control over your environment, everything else, like you got what you wanted. And then all of a sudden, boom, now here you are, vulnerable, aware, facing yourself in a way that you didn't expect, and facing what directions you could go in, but being paralyzed in a sense because you got what you wanted. These are things that people don't talk about that need to be talked about more in magical practice and in life in general. Because when we're willing to talk about these things openly and accept that sometimes the sense of control that we have over our environment and over ourselves is compromised, and that sometimes what we end up discovering is that we're in a situation where we've done everything we can, and then we realize, well, wait a minute, I'm still in this situation where I'm not feeling like I have all the options available to me. Now what? What do you do? Well, Maybe the best decision you make is that you take a few moments and you rest and you pause and you consider your choices and then you move forward. And instead of letting yourself be overwhelmed by the circumstances, you embrace them and accept them, and you accept your situation for what it is. And you ride the current until you find the answers you're looking for that can help you move in a different direction, or can help you paddle along the current and get you where you want to go without so many bruises. So that's what I think people overlook. I think people get fixated on having, the results they want, the life they want, everything else they want, and they don't realize that sometimes even when you get everything you want, you face a situation where now you're faced with, well, now what? What do I do now? I've gotten everything I wanted and I don't know what to do next. Or here I am in this situation and things aren't going the way I want, and no matter what I do, I don't have control over it. I can do all the things I want to do and I still don't have control. In both circumstances, I would say pause, reflect, give yourself some space to breathe and be without having to do. And accept that maybe the best thing you can do is just surrender to the current, surrender to what is going on in your life at the moment, and find the answers that you're looking for instead of trying to fight your way out and force your way. Not everything is resolved by force. Not everything is resolved by forcing things to happen the way you want them to. Sometimes you get to the resolution that you need and what you really want when you let go and embrace what is there. And from that, discover the opportunities that are available to you. And in my case, the last few days, I mean, the opportunity for me was that I got a chance to read and reflect and think about some things and make some different and make some decisions that I'm going to follow through on. And I think it was a good realization. And I'm still considering it even now that I have power back and everything else. I'm not necessarily in a rush because I realize I can give myself that gift. And that's something that I would extend out there to you. Give yourself the gift of a moment's reflection and consideration with what you do. It may be the best gift you give yourself in situations where you feel powerless and you want control. You may discover that you have more control than you thought. And in situations where you have the control, it may give you that awareness of, what do I really want to do with that? And how can I make that be meaningful and healthy, not just for myself, but for the people around me as well? All right. Thanks for watching, and catch you guys next week.